a dark and a troubled side of life, there's a bright and a sunny side too. Though we meet with the darkness and strife, the sunny side we also may view. Would you all sing the chorus? Keep on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Keep on the sunny side of life. It will help us every day. It will brighten all our ways. If we'll keep on the sunny side of life. It's about learning songs together. When you don't have the music on the wall or in a book, you should actually have to listen to each other a little bit to find the words and to find the tune. We're going to sing it through just a couple of times to get the feel of it. Some of you will know it. Just join right in. Let there be singing. Let there be joy. Let there be praise in the house of the Lord. Let there be mercy. Rejoice, rejoice. We're building together the house of the Lord. Let's try it again. Let there be singing. Let there be joy. Let there be praise in the house of the Lord. Let there be mercy. Rejoice, rejoice. We're building together the house of the Lord. Now we're going to try that again, and this time when we sing that, there's a text that I want you to have in mind. It says, God lives in the praises of the people. So when we sing this song, God is living inside that song. So let's sing it a cappella. Let there be singing. Let there be joy. Let there be praise in the house of the Lord. Let there be mercy. Rejoice, rejoice. We're building together the house of the Lord. Never quite sure what it is that gets my imagination going as I'm reading the text. I have a feeling when I wrote the title for today's talk, Out of the Darkness and Into the Light, I was probably feeling a little bit gloomy about the way the weather has been going. And there's a part of me that was hoping that the spring that ought to have arrived in the fullness of its glory would now be present with us. And it's present on the calendar, but it's not yet present in our experience. So the basic image I have is that there come times in life when we are in the dark. That is to say, we don't see things clearly, we don't experience things brightly. There's something lacking, and what's lacking is light. And light is that which enables us, of course, to find our way confidently. Now, I have been a seeker after light all of my life. I think I was born with a desire to know what's really going on. And the biggest question of my life occurred when I was not even 2 years old yet. And it's a question that occurs to children in various ways and at various ages, but it always comes. You see, up until just before I turned 2, I lived in this little tiny paradise. Mom and Dad, Grandma and Grandpa, village neighbors and friends, everybody loved this little boy. I was as if a plant in warm sunshine, well watered and well tended. I was growing in confidence. I was growing in intelligence. I was growing in the ability to relate to the adults. And then one day, my grandpa died. And he had been sick for a while, so I'd been picking up rumors. So there was some doubt starting to creep into me. What's this all about? Grandpa dying. What's death? And then Grandpa died, and that death took, like a seed, took root in my heart. And death became my life's problem. Now, I didn't be conscious of that until a little bit later in life, but looking back, I know that the question, if I'm going to die, why should I bother to live, has troubled me from a very early age. It was especially problematic, and I may have said this to you before, in about grade 6, puberty. Teachers wanted me to learn all kinds of stuff. The most difficult was long division. We would be made, at that time, we'd sit in rows, and we'd go, the first four, we'd go up to the blackboard, the teacher would give us a problem, we'd write it on the board, and then we'd have to solve it. Well, I'd be row 1, 2, 3, we'd go up, these three would go sit down, they'd solve the problem, and I'd be standing there looking at these numbers. And as I look back on that experience, which was very critical in my life, because from that point on I began to think of myself as a failure, as a no-good, as a non-achiever, a non-conformist. But the basic problem at that time is I wasn't that interested in long division, because I was still wondering, if you're going to die, why bother to live? Or maybe put it another way, if you're going to die, why bother to learn long division? So my life has been occupied with wrestling with death. The darkness which claims to extinguish the light. The darkness, and the Bible says this in one place, with which the whole world has been cast into fear. The whole world, it says, is in bondage through the fear of death. Now, I could talk to you about that in philosophical terms because I've been reading existential philosophy for most of my life. But the basic thing is there's an anxiety in us, in me as a child, but in all of us. There's an anxiety about the reality of death. What does it mean? When will it come? How will I experience it? Will I do well? But the thing that the Bible wants us to pay attention to is that death is only a part of life. Could you imagine looking up into the heavens on a wonderful evening with a full moon and there being no stars there? Death is like that black background for which those bright stars can be seen. Death is the background to all of our experience in life. And right now, we keep hearing about it. I think Jay mentioned to me this morning that there had been an accident, a fire in India, in which I think it was 100 persons had lost their lives. Death is in the news all the time. And the death is being presented to us as something that we should be afraid of. It might come to you soon. Look out. Be aware. Do something to protect yourself. And I'm going to suggest that one of the things we can learn from our tradition, from our text, is that death doesn't have the last word. And that we ought not to have it in the foreground of our experience. We should see it, and we should say, when it comes, God give me the grace to do well with it. God give me the grace not to be frightened. God give me the grace not to be intimidated. God give me the grace to live into it with joy, with delight. There was a tradition in industrializing Europe which came out of the Methodist folk, which was called the Good Death. And the good death was when a person was in their last phase of life, and the family and friends would gather around, and they would sing. And they would think of this as an approach of a transition, the taking of a journey. Some of you may know the Lebanese poet, Khalil Gibran, who wrote a little book called The Prophet. And The Prophet is a story or a poem about a person who is going to be taken away. And before he's taken away, he wants to say a few things to the people. And they ask him all kinds of questions. Death is a change. And the texts that we have in front of us today are about change. Now, death is a physical experience for each one of us. We all have had people we love die. We all have memories. We all have treasured memories. But there are other kinds of deaths. For an example, this morning William was coming into church with a lovely new red hat on, and Grandma, being Grandma, said, "William, hat off," in church. And I said, "Oh, my grandma, who's up in heaven, every time I walk into a building with the hat on, my grandma's voice says, 'George, take your hat off.'" And recently, I've been saying to Grandma, "I'm sorry, Grandma, that old way of understanding the world has died. There's a new way of understanding the world. And rather than fight it, I'm going to go along with it." And by that I mean, when I go, sometimes I'm invited to be a guest, say, to speak to a university class, and it's all these young people, I think it makes sense for me to walk in with my hat on. Because they say, "Oh, he's not one of those old people, those hats off in public places people. He's got his hat on. Maybe he's learning a little bit about what it's like to live in the new world." But our church, in a particular way, struggles with the passing of the old and the emergence of the new. But if it does not let go of the old, it will die. Because the old has no future. That is to say, the way we did things won't work now the way they did then. Anybody here care to go back to a time when there were no flush toilets? No, some things bring us convenience and such things. But in church, we tend to get attached to things. I remember once in Dugald, where I did my first work as a lay minister, and I came up just like this, up from there and up this step, and I stumbled over a stone. So the next day when I came into my office, the first thing I did is move that stone from that step. Well, they didn't hear my sermon that Sunday morning. Next time we talked, all they could think about is, "You moved that stone. Had you no idea that that was a sacred stone to the memory of somebody or something?" And what we do is we attach meaning onto things that at one point in time were significant and important. But to hold on to those things is to hold on to what can't be kept. So we are now in the earth going through a time of substantial change, and in particular, we are going through change about how we think about God. So I'm not sure about you, but the picture of God that I was given as a child, as a great, big, powerful warrior sitting on a throne in some celestial place, that image is gone for me. The image of God that I have now is a tiny little light within every human being. In fact, it says in the book of Genesis, He made human beings male and He made them female, and they represented the image of God. Where can you see God? In human being. And that's what Jesus came to make clear. And Jesus got into all kinds of quarrel with the religious folks and with the political folks, because he was suggesting that what was most important was being neglected, and what was not important at all was being honored. Now, if some of you folks, and I won't go far with this, have been paying attention to your news, you know that once again, some folks feel that other folks don't deserve to be treated with respect. That's a lie. There's nothing in God's Word that says you have the right to judge anybody for being different. You might want to get into a relationship with them if they're mean and nasty people, but you can't pick on them because you don't like what they do when you're not looking. So the world is changing, and some people don't know how to go with that change. But Jesus is the one who makes very, very clear that you don't need to give your attention to supporting those who are doing really, really well. They're okay. He said, I didn't come to find those who are saved. I came to find those who are lost. And the psalm text that we read today responsibly is so central to what God has in mind. And by God, I am again speaking of that image that picture, that presence deep within us that speaks to us if we learn how to listen. The voice within us that says, are you sure you want to do that? Maybe you could try this. There are two basic powers in the world right now. That's the power of God's love, which is gentle and patient and kind and caring and generous. And then there's the other power. And that's the power which is spoiling things for everyone. That's the power which is building towers, magnificent structures, celebrating the glory of our achievement, even if it means destroying the planet to do so. There was a sad thing in the news not long ago. The Premier of British Columbia, she was talking to kids, and she said to the kids, it's important for us to cut the forests down. Because if we don't cut the forests down, your moms and dads will have to pay more taxes. This is a leader speaking to children about the deforestation of the planet for the sake of profit. Do you know that in New Brunswick, when Barbara and I lived there, New Brunswick was a forestry place. Many, many families had their homes, they had their livelihoods because moms and dads worked in factories where wood was processed and turned into useful things. Do you know that there are now people in New Brunswick who are cutting trees down, putting them on boats, and sending them to other countries so we can go to IKEA and buy cheap furniture? But do you know what that cost? Thousands of families lost their income. Thousands of families lost dad's pension. Thousands of families lost their source of existence. They were treated as being expendable. So the folks who were cutting the trees down were making more money by selling it to other people than they could make by working at home to do things with that wood. And that's not just going on in New Brunswick. We're selling our water, we're selling our oil, we're selling all of our precious commodities to global corporations. And everywhere in Canada, people are losing livelihoods. It's possible that some of your grandchildren will have no opportunity to find work. In Kamloops, where we live, they want to build a mine. They want to build a mine right next to a neighborhood. Barbara and I lived in this neighborhood. There's a school which is not even a kilometer from the boundary of where the mine is going to be. It's an open pit mine with all kinds of health hazards. And they're going to mine copper and other trace metals, and they're going to ship those trace metals to places like Brazil and China and India, and there they're going to be used to make robots. So you know that it used to be when you were young, you could get a job at Woolworths as a checkout person. You could get a job at a gas station. You could get a job doing so many things which were not that demanding, but they gave you an opportunity to start learning about earning income, about being wise about saving. Everywhere, people are being replaced by robots in Canada. In gas stations, in grocery stores, in department stores. More and more robots. Less and less people working. That's what the psalm is talking about. Those people who profit at the expense of others. God's mad about it. And he's not mad at the people, but he's mad at the darkness that rules their lives. Barbara and I watched a film this week. We watched 2 documentaries last week. We watched a film this week. But the message was the same. There are so many wicked things going on in the world, and there are so many people being quiet about it. And it was Martin Luther King who said it's not so much the darkness or the wickedness that's hard, it's the fact that so many people are willing to be quiet. So the text in John talks about they used to fish this way and they didn't catch any fish. And the story happens in the morning when the sun is rising, when you can begin to see things that have become indistinct. They become clear. And Jesus says, try doing it different. And they tried doing it different. And all of their frustration was gone. They had nets full of fish. In other words, fishermen were getting a good living again. But that's not just what the story is about. The story is about that there's not a problem of too little stuff in the world for everybody to have a fair share. There's not enough food for everybody. There is enough food for everybody to have a fair share. I heard somewhere that something like $30 billion worth of food gets wasted in Canada every year. $30 billion worth of food while millions of people are starving. And I don't say that I can tell you, you got to do this different or you got to do that different. But I would like to encourage you to say, dear God, the text in Revelation speaks about a new heaven and a new earth, about a new creation. Let me be part of that happening. Let me get involved. And just walking about, I'm always listening. And I heard some voice this morning say, but I'm already overwhelmed with my life. And we had a meeting here not so long ago with a couple of ladies who are in Palestine, negotiating with folks around the Israel-Palestine conflict. I was just telling somebody this week, I often get into the middle of a sentence. It was my mom. I get into the middle of a sentence and I forget where the sentence was going. But maybe that's okay. It doesn't mean you have to start pouring energy that you don't have. But it might mean that you can start taking energy from over here and moving it to over here. For an example, and I'm not going to pick on anybody, but how many billions of dollars are going out of Canada? That is to say, we're taking our credit cards, we're taking our cash, we're taking our checks, and we're purchasing things, and the profits are going to corporations that have banks in other countries. We need to learn to be wise. Why can't we be growing vegetables all over Canada? Why can't we be growing forests and turning them into houses in Canada? Why do we have to be servants of the economy? And not the economy of everybody, but the economy that serves some very well and others not at all. I've struggled with death all of my life and with darkness all of my life. I've seen what I consider to be a light, and that light offers us a way. And that light is not in the doctrines of the church. You must believe in the Trinity. You must believe that Jesus physically rose from the dead. You must believe that the Scriptures are the divinely inspired Word of God. You don't have to believe any of that, but you do have to wrestle with it. You do have to struggle with it. If it doesn't mean that, what does it mean? And I'm going to say it's very, very simple. The Bible is about one thing. The Bible is about God creating a heaven and an earth, which is very, very good, and it has a place for all creatures. It has a place for all peoples, but the temptation to power got into the mix, and from that point on, the history of humanity and creation has been a history of war, bloodshed, pollution, and etc. I don't say that to overwhelm you. I'm saying that to say there's deep darkness at work in the earth, and you don't have to be scared of it. Let your little light shine. The decisions you make about your money matter. The decisions you make about your commitments matter. And I'm speaking to a group of people that I know very well is out there making a difference. I see you folks in various aspects of our community's life. I don't wish to discourage you. I want to encourage you. But please, long for the new heaven and long for the new earth. Don't say this is the way it is and we just have to accept it. Pray for change. Pray for newness. And maybe you don't know how to pray. And I'll just use the example of push-ups. I can't do push-ups, but if I started today and managed one, I suspect tomorrow I might be able to do two. Now, push-ups are not that important to me, but what I mean to say is that spiritual exercise will bring growth, and with growth will come change, and with change will come hope, and with hope will come the new creation. God does not just want to be worshipped. God wants to be followed. Do what God does. And what does God do? Be kind to lepers, be kind to Samaritans, be kind to prostitutes, be kind to people who are left out of the social equations. For goodness sakes, as much as you can, practice kindness, and drop by drop, the tide will turn, and a new heaven and a new earth will be revealed, in which none are excluded because they are different, or because they're poor, or because of any other reason. God is longing for us all to be one family. Let us build a house where love can dwell. Not just this little house, but that this whole creation will become a place of love. Amen.